middle.
There's, with hockey, there's so many things that have to go right at a specific time in order for teams to win the Stanley Cup. And, some good examples of that, again, like the LA team from 2012, St. Louis a few years ago, they were bottom of the NHL. And then, Jordan Binnington went on that disgusting heater and then they just won the Stanley Cup off of vibes and the good goaltending. Like, that was insane. Like, these things happen in hockey and pretty much only in hockey. Like, in basketball, that doesn't happen often at all. Very rarely do, teams that are outside of the top 2 or 3 make it all, to the conference finals or the finals, or like that's not a very rare, thing to happen. Baseball, I don't know too well, but I don't think that happens often in the MLB. And in football, it's the Chiefs every year, and whomstever they play, who is also one of the top teams in football. Like, if there's ever a sport in which, like, just get there and we'll see what happens, is like one of the biggest keys it's hockey. So again, I go back to what I said earlier, is like, there is, and albeit very small for sure, but a small percentage chance that this team looks around and says, wait a minute, like, we're actually not bad. Like, we can actually do this if we just play to our strengths and, like, actually play as well as we can. And then they could make it, like, they could make a run in the playoffs. Will they? I don't think so. But maybe. The chances is more than zero. Now, Nick, we are getting some trade deadline related questions. Do you want to do upcoming games here, or do you want to?
Let's do deadline. Let's do deadline, because it's more topical, and it's the easiest thing to talk about, because everybody plays fantasy football and likes to talk about trades and value.
Of course. So,
we were talking about this right before we went live about Kreider. It depends if they activate him off of injured reserve or not by Friday. If he's not healthy, I don't think a team would trade for him. I think it's really that straightforward. I think you very easily could get something decent for him. Nothing crazy. You're probably getting a mid-round pick just because he hasn't played that well this year. He's been injured all year. He's old, and the Rangers probably have to retain salary, and he has 2 more years after this on his contract.
Something
so
like that.
A lot of external factors kind of minimize that. In an ideal world, you would trade him, because you would rather have that lineup spot for somebody like a Will Cooley, or if you want to keep it clear, for Othman or Perreault, just because of where Kreider's at in his career. You also want to do right by him, but at the same time, you got to do what's right for the team. I don't think so, just because I feel like Kreider's a summer trade. I feel like if they trade him, that'll happen closer to the draft, but that's just me.
Maybe. And that question came from Matt Villano on YouTube. Yeah, the conversation, I think, stops and ends with when the Rangers activate Kreider off of IR, because they have this 2-day break from Wednesday to Saturday, this Thursday, Friday, 2 days where they don't play. So I think if they activate Kreider in that weird in-between, there's a good chance that he gets traded. Like, if he gets activated on Thursday, for example, which would be a kind of a strange day to activate, a player right after, right around the deadline, that would kind of signal to me, okay, so he's like, the Rangers are signaling to teams that Chris Kreider is healthy enough to play right now and can help you in the playoffs. Please call me. Let's figure something out. If he doesn't, if he stays on IR, I kind of like Nick said, I think this is going to be more of a summer thing. So that is really tied to what Drury is going to do with Kreider's IR distinction. We have another question from Dimitri. He says he can't listen during it, but we'll listen later. Florida needs a backup goalie. Obviously, they traded Spencer Knight to Chicago for Seth Jones and, first round pick and all that. What are the chances they go after Quick?
Okay.
That's a good
0
question,
because Jonathan Quick's not leaving Connecticut. I hate to one of my friends is working a youth hockey game this morning, and Jonathan Quick's kid is in net. Jonathan Quick's not leaving Connecticut. I've been, as the host of Locked On Oilers, Jonathan Quick's kind of like the perfect backup to bring in to back up Stuart Skinner of like veteran playoff experience. And I know that's not happening. It's entirely in Quick's court if he wants to A, stay, B, if he wants to keep going. I think he's wanted to be back closer to his family basically his whole life, and now that he's finally here, I struggle to imagine him leaving, even if it's only, till June or whenever his next team got eliminated. He's the ideal backup goalie candidate, like if you were a good team and you wanted to get an extra goalie for the playoffs. I just don't think he's going to want to leave, and I don't even think the Rangers would ask, in all honesty, because they also don't have a third goalie they could call up to really back him up. That's the other part of it too, because they're like, it's weird because like part of me wants to say, well, they're still trying to make the playoffs even though they traded Ryan Lindgren, and I feel like if you go the drop off from Quick to an AHL starter is
Dylan Garand in this case.
It's significant enough where I do think that I just don't really think so. It would make sense, if you got a 4th round, 5th round pick for Jonathan Quick, you would do it, but I don't think he's going to want to leave. That's the real kicker of it.
Yeah, I would imagine that teams like Florida, Edmonton, some other teams would call.
Yeah.
And they would ask. I don't know if Drury would want to ship Quick away. And again, only because like, are you comfortable with Dylan Garand as your backup now? And is Dylan Garand the backup of the future? Now, again, the Rangers will have to figure that out sooner rather than later. And I would have to imagine that is on their list of things to do and talk about moving forward here, because again, Quick is 39 years old, so that conversation is going to come sooner rather than later. But they're 2 points out of a playoff spot, and Quick has, by all accounts, been not only a great intangibles guy, but also Shesterkin loves him, and he's been they've been really close, and Quick has also just been good. Like the stats aren't tremendous, but he's kind of done all he can, especially, last night, short, small sample size, but he was really good last night, made some really great saves. And would I be upset to see him go? I mean, it depends on the trade. Like if the Rangers would sell him for an Arby's coupon, then yeah, I'd be upset. But, if some team was like, hey, we'll give you a 2nd round pick for Jonathan Quick, and that's not going to happen, but let's just say it does, then you absolutely trade Jonathan Quick and, and then you just bring up Garand and then have that, we'll sail off into the sunset and just essentially throw Grant to the wolves and see, hey, okay, well, we need you for like 5 or 6 of these games. Let's see what you got. And we need you to win. We need you to step up. Pressure situation. We're in the playoff hunt, and you're starting against insert team name here. You got to go out there and you got to play, and you got to play well. And there's some merit to trading Quick and then just seeing what you have in Dylan Garand from that perspective, where if he can't step up during a playoff run where you're close and you need your goalie to play well, then you kind of already answered your question of, is he capable of being your backup for the foreseeable future? And if he does play well, then that also answers your question. So there is some merit to that. It just very much depends on what teams are going to give for Jonathan Quick if that conversation happens to come about.
Okay, so while we're on the subject, we might as well do this now. I was going to save this for later, but okay, so I'm looking at the Rangers roster on Puckpedia. The only expiring free agents after this season ends are Reilly Smith, who has been held out of the lineup. He's 100% getting traded. Yeah. It's simply a matter of where.
Yeah, we talked. I brought this up to you during the game. I think because we also got a question from James Marshall on YouTube, where will Smith go? So it fits into what you were saying. I have a sneaky suspicion it's going to be some team like LA,
someone middle of the pack that needs an extra guy. Yeah, I could see them. I could see Minnesota. I could see Detroit. I could see someone in that tier. Like, I don't think if you're like Vegas,
St. Louis, maybe
St. Louis, I don't think is going for it. I'd be weird if St. Louis did. But Florida, I could see. I could see Tampa Bay. I could see
maybe Vegas brings them back.
I could see Vegas. I could see Ottawa. I could see someone in that middle of the pack that just wants an extra top 9 forward. Reilly Smith is fine for what he is. He's got decent defensive impacts. He's an okay penalty killer. He's going to have 0.4 points per game this year. He's fine. He's not a bad piece if you're trying to augment your lineup. It's just The Rangers brought him in to do something he's not capable of doing anymore. He's not a top 6 forward on a cup winner anymore. He's not. He's had a nice NHL career. He's a solid pro. He'll be really cheap because the Rangers will retain on him too. So if you're adding him, you can get him at like 1.75, 1.8 against the cap. And that's, you get a top 9 forward for 1.8 million for the rest of the season. That's a steal. That is an absolute steal, and that'll help the Rangers get a slightly better return. He's probably in the market a ballpark of like a 4th round pick, but if you retain salary, you might be able to get that bumped up to a 3rd. I think if you can turn Reilly Smith into a 3rd round pick, that's good business. That's what you should be trying to do.
Sure. I mean, maybe a team like Calgary would be interested. Like they're a team. Dustin Wolf should be the rookie of the year. I mean, my man's is the only reason the Calgary Flames right now are in a playoff spot, and like 90% of that is because of Dustin Wolf. Like my man's has been incredible. And if you haven't watched the Flames, if you haven't watched Dustin Wolf play, you're missing out on some tremendous goaltending. I mean, Dustin Wolf has been sensational all year long, and he should be the runaway rookie of the year award winner. Whether the NHL wants to give a goalie that award is, I think the most deserving players should always win the award. I mean, that's a hot take. I understand that, but Dustin Wolf should be the winner. But I can see Calgary rewarding the team with somebody like a Reilly Smith of like, hey, we're not going all in because I mean, look at the standings, but Reilly Smith is a good addition to a team that has probably earned a little bit of that coming into this playoff push. So I can see that.
So other than Reilly Smith, the only other unrestricted free agent this year is Calvin DeHaan, who probably not getting brought back, but if they brought him back on, he's getting $800,000 this year.
Played well yesterday.
He was fine last night. I had no qualms with that. Yeah. If they brought him back to be the 6th or 7th guy for next season, that'd be fine. They have a lot more RFAs, Edstrom, Cooley, Kaliev, Rempe, Parsonen, then K'Andre Miller, Vakanainen, Zach Jones, and Matthew Robertson. Of that next grouping, the only one I could conceivably see getting traded is K'Andre Miller, and that's only if it were a double change of scenery type deal. If they were to trade him for a different restricted free agent, whether, I saw somebody say, why would you do Bowen Byram for him? And like Byram's injury stuff terrifies me because he also can't stay healthy at all. But when he's been healthy, he's been a pretty solid NHL defenseman, but, kind of petered out, plateaued, if you will, in his development, very similar to Miller. And we've been talking about this for a while with Miller. At 25, you're not totally done developing, but you're pretty close to what you are. And Miller seems to be a really flashy, occasionally good, most of the time okay defenseman that just makes some bad mistakes. It's a really confounding problem because 2 or 3 years ago, I would have assumed by now he'd solidify himself as the first pair lefty, and through not only his fault, he hasn't been great over the last 2 years, but also, he's been blocked. He's been log jammed behind Ryan Lindgren, and well, Jacob Trouba loves playing with him. We got to keep them together, so we can't break them up, even though that would probably help our team. But I really think Reilly Smith is the only certainty. Other than that, it would really kind of, I wouldn't say surprising, but I would say unlikely. I think Reilly Smith is the only certainty that gets moved by Friday.
Yeah, I would assume so. I mean, like we said with Kreider, if he gets off of IR before Friday, I would up the percentage of him getting moved pretty dramatically. But if not, then Reilly Smith is probably the only player that gets dealt at this point because the Rangers' biggest names on the board have all been traded by this point. Yeah. So Reilly Smith is probably the biggest name right out there for the Rangers. I kind of, barring some surprise that I'm not foreseeing, and Nick, I don't think you are either. Yeah, that because at this point they'd probably be holding those guys out too, and they're not. So.
And the subsequent moves that, if they come, I think are more summer things. I think, You would want, if you're going to trade Kreider or Zibanejad, I think you're probably doing that in the summer, because in the summer there's more liquidity. Everybody has more cap space. Everybody's more amicable to big trades. It's hard to execute the big trade in season, you know. I think those are more of transitional moves that'll happen in the summer when the Rangers have a better idea of where other teams are at, and frankly where they're at, you know. If they sneak into the playoffs and win a round, maybe they're a little more amicable to running it back and trying to figure out the right mix of the old heads and the younger guys. I don't know. It's a real conundrum they're facing there.
We got another comment question from Alan Anderson on YouTube. Any chance we get Brant Clark from LA? Good luck.
Probably not for Reilly Smith. Yeah. You would need to give up more for that. I like Brant Clark, but you would need to give up more. The Rangers, I know we've been hearing, you know, they want to be targeted buyers. The only way they really want to go out and acquire someone is if they have term. Excuse me. They don't have the full trough of assets. You know, they don't have, where's their picks? They don't have a 1 this year because they traded that for Miller. Next year, they don't have a 2 or a 4. The year after that, they don't have a 2 or a 4. So they don't have a full coffer of picks. That you probably don't want to burn assets on anything that's expiring this year unless it's a restricted free agent who you have team control over. I think that wouldn't really make sense.
I would love Brant Clark, 22. You know, he's somebody that is going to be a solid player in the NHL. Good luck getting LA to trade him to you.
Yeah, LA's an older team. They have a decent second wave of younger guys, but like their most important players are older. They want to hold on to as many of those pieces as they can to try and ease that transition so they don't end up like Pittsburgh is, you know, when once Kopitar and Doughty hang it up. You don't want to end up where Pittsburgh is, where you're entirely dependent on your old guys, and then you fill out your bottom 6 with guys like Kevin Hayes, Matt Nieto, 40-year-old Jeff Carter. You know, you don't really want to do that.
I mean, there's an argument to be made that like, okay, well, if LA really likes a player like Matthew Robertson, for example. Okay, well, if they really want Robertson, if they really want like, you know, a future third for Clark, you know, plus other things, I wouldn't imagine that LA would just give up Brant Clark that easily. But you know, there's an avenue for it to happen. It just very much hinges on which I would imagine young players LA would want in return. And you know, if they want Robertson, then okay, that's a conversation that we'd be willing to have. If they want Berard, if they want, obviously the Rangers aren't trading Gabe Perreault for Brant Clark, but like all of that conversation hinges upon, okay, who does LA want, and can we have that conversation? Brant Clark is going to be a great player. He's already is an NHL player at this point of his career. He's going to get better. There's an avenue to be created, but it's paved by LA and who they would want